You are listening to American WAG.
American WAG.
Where the mind is respected and the truth is sometimes detected. Hi, this is Mike Bowen, and I'm answering some questions that I'm going to be answering later on. And right now I'm just practicing to see if I can do this. The first question, why are you so concerned about indoctrination, ethnic studies, CRT? And I have 6 minutes. Well, first of all, I've been involved as an avocation with what I basically call, a loss of rationality in our society. And I came in through the door of the intellectual dark web when I learned about Jordan Peterson and Brett Weinstein on a Joe Rogan podcast. It's funny that I don't listen to either of those three guys. This was like 3 years ago. Although I did read Brett Weinstein's latest book. But I was just saying, if the whole country is dumbing down and we in Silicon Valley become isolated as these warlocks and magicians who have these mystical skills, we're going to be the witches they burn. Because quite frankly, I think we are dumbing down our culture and we are playing to the lowest common denominator. And that goes especially for our populist politics, which I abandoned in 2008. So this is another sword pointing at our hearts, and it's so abysmally ignorant. This is another sword pointed at our hearts, and it's so abysmally ignorant about how we think that I've been kind of forced to dig deeper and look at the philosophy of science and find out why it is people are thinking wrong or emoting their way to success, and trying to defend the scientific method and the hard sciences and the hard industries that I enjoy being a part of. And I think if we don't do that collectively, we're kind of doomed. And people like to talk about United States open society as an experiment, and the experiment is going wrong. And we're admitting new things into evidence that are broken and don't work. And critical race theory is one of those. The special thing about critical race theory and DEI and ESG and all of these concepts, these ethical concepts, is that they represent a bad application of a good idea. And the base good idea is to support the open society, to make progress. Except there are these double standards and a reversal of things in the academy that are allowing the wrong methods to go forward because of the right sentiments. But also, some of the bad sentiments are crawling in under the wire as well. So you really have racial essentialism crawling under the wire, pretending to be an anti-racist ethos, and it's not. And I find it that people have not been educated to think their way out of the box. because we have a culture that allows anything that gains an audience to become profitable. And so I look at, for example, classic movies, and I love movies like Rear Window by Hitchcock. And nowadays, young people are attracted to cartoons, and you don't get actors like Jimmy Stewart who portray complex men, and not just Jimmy Stewart, but Lauren Bacall. You don't get these complex people involved in anything, and so our emotional lives are become more and more shallow. We're watching stuff like The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and people do not actually know how to think their way out of these racial boxes that are becoming the standard of our identities, and people are losing their selves to these identities, which are negotiated in society along bad idea axes. And racial essentialism is a clear and present danger to rationality and to a civil and open society. And so I'm bound and determined to get in there because it can happen here. We are just human beings, and we make errors, and a lot of these errors can get all the way into law if we let them. So we really can't let them. So that's my aim, is to recover what is good about Western civilization, starting with the philosophy of science, and hopefully I can get people in the hard sciences and in the computer realm to reject this slippery slope of good intentions with bad implementations to take over the national conversation. Well, it's already taken over, just we haven't gotten it into law yet, but I'm sure people are trying. Question 2 is, how do you see indoctrination, ethnic studies, CRT, affecting communities you're a part of? Well, as you can see, I've grown a little gray hair, and the communities I'm a part of, physical communities, tend to be around my hobbies, and so I have the good fortune of having led a comfortable, prosperous, affluent life, and I get to choose what communities I'm a part of. But I've also lived in many black neighborhoods in California and across the country, as well as many affluent neighborhoods. And I would tend to say that people my age in black neighborhoods tend to be old school. So, in the words of De La Soul, I've got too much family to heed those threats. People who grew up when I did witnessed the controversy of the Bakke decision. We recognized the large influx of black Americans into corporate America. When I was in college, these were among the first years that HBCUs fell behind in terms of absolute numbers of black graduates from their halls. And I was done with school before these things of like ethnic or African themed houses and separate black graduation was becoming almost the norm. And I watched multiculturalism become narrower and narrower to kind of a hard essential racism. So there are people, well, I would just say multiculturalism now is just kind of a moral fig leaf for racial essentialism. Because as soon as you say cultural appropriation, you're basically saying, hey, that culture belongs to us. You got no right to be doing that kind of thing, which is a whole kinds of bad ideas. So people my age tend to be old school, and we tend to appreciate R&B and hip hop and jazz and blues and gospel. And so there's something about us that automatically understands black diversity in arts and culture, whereas younger people only know hip hop and R&B, and then they only know what's gone in the past 5 or 10 years, because that's the way the singles are priced on Apple Music. They're $1.10 if you want to hear the latest, and so I am accustomed to a certain kind of traditionalism that turns out to be a conservative of more crossover. But I'm not saying that's exclusively the case with younger people. I think younger people today, on the positive side, certainly young people in my family and those families that we hang out with, certainly have a more broad cosmopolitan taste for, say, Japanese, Asian food, Japanese anime, Mexican food, Mexican folks. My youngest daughter, her boyfriend is Israeli, and my kids traveled to Europe for their time, one to Spain and one to Thailand. So there is a new class of people, young people, at least in my socioeconomic circles, that are more hip to the world and more willing to do that. And I'm fortunate living in Southern California, which is multicultural in the true sense, and multilingual. And I think, as I say that, I want to bring to the idea of Ishmael Reed's Japanese by Spring, which is a really great book which parodies this idea of those of us who lived through the 80s knew what it was like to feel like Japan was taking over the world, in the same way people are saying China's taking over the world. And we saw it didn't happen, but people were obsessed. And I was certainly one of those, because I worked in a company whose market share was getting taken away from it. So Japanese by Spring makes the distinction that says people who want to act Japanese, and then there's people who actually want to learn how to speak Nihongo, which is an order of magnitude more difficult, and you can't fake it. And right now, I wonder if everybody who's talking up diversity is actually willing to go to that length. So I would look at high schools and say, okay, well, how successful is your foreign language program? Are students really learning a foreign language? And if they're not, learning literature, then everything they're doing is just a kind of surface materialism, which is you can put on a shirt that says something Japanese, and then suddenly you're multicultural. And it is that veneer that we have to deal with. I think Black diversity is a very important thing, and we need to respect that. And you're only going to be able to do that in the same traditional ways that have always worked, which is to get outside of your box, get outside of your comfort zone, and make friends, and cross over, and really do that kind of thing. Not to prove anything, but to adjust yourself. And I don't think people are doing that. I think people are not improving themselves and not challenging themselves. They are just trying to fit into an identity box which they expect to be privileged by somebody else in some way. And that is the loss of the humanities that we're facing, because people are not improving themselves. And I always think about this when I think about the antipathy that is demonstrated when people start talking about the haves and the have-nots, and the 1% versus the 99%, in that everybody can see that character counts. And when we see wealthy people who have time to invest in themselves and make themselves into better people, and they don't do it, that's why we should be angry at them. But we can't really be anything but hypocrites if we're not actually trying to make ourselves better people. And so you can say, and so we're just playing that identity game. Oh, they're a rich person, and that's their identity, and we still know that they're an asshole. And I'm saying, well, if you want to be a better person and not an asshole, then you have to invest in yourself. You have to make yourself a better person. And you can't do that playing the identity game. You can't just say, well, as a black man, I'm cool. I don't have to do anything to improve myself. And that's what I hope to communicate, is the difference between self and an identity. Because an identity is something is negotiated in public, and you have no control over that. And suddenly people with autism are fashionable, or suddenly people with small dogs are fashionable. So you have that identity, then you're fashionable. But that fashion is going to turn. And CRT proves that even the substance of Martin Luther King's message can turn. And society will change and go through all of these changes. And if you're not necessarily improving yourself, then you're stuck with the identity. And we're saying that all cops are bastards. That's their identity. Cops didn't have anything to do with that. They didn't earn it. And so people have to think their way out of their identities and improve themselves according to virtues. And it is not a virtuous thing to just say, well, my identity is virtuous, and their identity is less virtuous than mine. People need to stop playing that game and just say, I'm going to make myself a better person. And everything that goes against that is corrupting of society. Specifically against Black Americans, I think a lot of young Black Americans, and certainly the media through which we reify ideas about ourselves or our identities, is being just very shallow right now. I don't think anybody reads Black literature. I think people would rather watch Black reality TV. Or we went through this argument about, should Idris Elba be the next James Bond 007? And if you are not, when I was growing up, Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man was said to be the greatest American novel of all time. And nobody has made it into a movie. And you don't want Daniel Craig, as great an actor as he is, he's not going to play the Invisible Man. So there is a wealth of Black culture that is not being put forth, because there's a certain excellence to it that it's not brain dead simple to consume. You have to improve yourself to think about it, to understand it, to improve yourself. And that's a virtuous cycle that you get from high quality literature, stuff that has been translated into multiple languages and published around the world. And we're not doing that. We're just, this is like another TV commercial with people splashing kids in overalls splashing paint against the wall and doing hip hop head spins. And that's creativity. And it has been for 40 years. They were still doing that stuff, back when I was in college. And mean mug hip hop. But, this is not to complain about hip hop or anything. It's to complain about a box and these boxes that we know of. And unless and until we can broaden our imaginations about what we can be, rather than saying these white people are doing this, or those Asian people are doing this, or these Jews are doing that. That for me, that is the definition of racism. If you have to say that group of people has to do X so that my life can be better, well, then that is the fundamental aspect of bigotry. All bigotry starts with that kind of statement, and you can smell that out anywhere if you use it. When you just say, well, those kind of people need to do this for me to be happy with my life, or for me to be better in my life. And that's blaming other people. It's not taking responsibility for your own self. You're just saying, I'm this identity, and this identity is opposed to that identity. And it's a sad and sorry state. But specifically, I don't like the idea. I'll give you a story. When CDs were brand new and it was the cutting edge technology, you couldn't get reggae music on CD. And you could go all around the city and get all kinds of Deutsche Grammophon. I could get Beethoven, I could get Chopin, but I couldn't get Bob Marley. I couldn't get Steel Pulse or Yellowman. And not that I was a huge reggae fan, I was just like, how is it that these have not gone to pressing? And there was just a time before that happened. I want you to imagine this following scenario, which is crazy. But I think if you're into racial conspiracy theories, it might have an impression on you. But anyway, just a thought experiment is a white supremacist cabal of librarians and academics have gone through all the libraries in America, and they have taken out all the books by black authors, men and women, or Caribbeans or Africans, all the black authors, and they've gone through and removed all of the books that have black triumph, and all of the books that are a documentation of black failure, they put back on the shelves. Okay? And so if you, no matter where you go, and you open a book and it talks about black people, it will be about black failure. Now, if this were the case, then all of the knowledge in the world about black people would be about the deprivations of slavery and the need for reparations, because black success would be nowhere in the picture. But if you actually listen to what's going on in the media and the news, it's as if that had already happened, because people are not talking about black success. They are obsessed with black failure. They are obsessed with the history of black failure. And everybody who's involved in this CRT is want to emphasize that. And not only that, but put Whitey on the hook for that. All right? So stories about black success that aren't a part of Black History Month or Black Lives Matter, which is also a something that is subordinate to white supremacy, they disappear. So in fact, those of us who are successful as black folks in our own inimitable ways, we're disappearing. We're becoming invisible. Because if I say CRT is full of shit, they're saying, well, what kind of black man are you? Well, you obviously don't know, because you obviously have not been listening to what black success is like. And I'm not pretending that I'm, Jesus, but I'm not a sad sack walking around looking at my toes or gazing at my navel and saying, woe is me. I'm a successful person, and I'm raised a successful family, and I'm reinforcing the successes in my family. And I don't walk around looking at the world as if it's completely and totally against me. I mean, I've been to many places in the world to say that. You know, I've been to Italy. I got family in Italy. I haven't been to West Africa, but I have family in West Africa. I've been to Australia, to Germany. I haven't been to Japan, but I've had family that has lived in Japan. And one of my good friends has spent a lot of time in China, in Hong Kong. So this is just an America-centric, race color struck problem. And my brother right now lives in Turkey, and he loves it. He loves it. He's living in a villa in Bodrum, which is just like the Greek part of the Aegean Sea, and it's gorgeous. It's lovely, and he's just chilling. And you know, people don't quite understand that they're human beings because they're circling around this small little drain of identity, which is really nothing more than racial stereotypes. And it's sad. It's sad. I feel sorry for people who think they are these essential creatures, because they will be unable to think their way out of those little tiny boxes. And they will believe that they have to rage in order to do it. Because I'll tell you one thing, Americans understand black rage. They understand what happened to Reginald Denny. And it's burned into people's mind about some guy with sagging pants kicking a white dude in the head with his boots. And you know, if it comes to that, I got other places to be, and I can take my family with you. And you know, America can burn. I lived through 1967, 1968, 69 riots. I know what it's like. And I'm not saying it can't happen again. And a lot of people are looking forward to that. They're hoping that they're going to get something out of it. They're not. They're not. So, you know, what can I tell you? Ask me another question. I think part of the sad part of this is that Americans who call themselves white, so-called white people, they should know better. They should know better. You know, as I wrote before, I was like, every white person is a nigger lover. Some part of their white identity conflicts with the white, some part of their white self, some part of their self conflicts with their white identity. Some part of myself conflicts with my black identity. And the sooner you call me an Uncle Tom, the happier I am, because it just lets me know how limited your imagination is about me. And the sooner they call you a white racist, honky, ofe, whatever gray boy, whatever they call you, the sooner you should be happy, because then you know that they've run out of imagination. And you can go and find some real friends with real common interests and do real work or real play or real anything together in defiance of these stereotypes and racial traffic. So, you know, it's easy enough if you're honest with yourself and you don't lie to yourself. The thing is that we're maintaining, somebody is, publishers, I don't know, I don't want to pick on the New York Times or the Atlantic Magazine, but they've done better in the past. But somebody is keeping this nonsense alive. And, you know, somebody's monetizing this mishigas. So as soon as we, you know, start saying that CRT Emperor is naked, the better off we're going to be. And we already know ahead of time what the arguments against our freedom and our actual variety and pluralism is going to be, because their thoughts don't go much deeper than the racial essentialism that is the core of their ethos right now. and they're just going to step on their own tails and trip themselves up, and we're just going to sit back and giggle, and I'm going to mock them because I'm shameless when it comes to that. So it's a stupid fad. It's just stupidity, and you just have to try not to get bogged down by it. I mean, the same sewers run through every city and under every neighborhood because human beings are full of shit. But you don't want to live down in those sewers. So stand up tall and proud and stay out of those nasty places. Thank you for listening to American WAG. Join us again, won't you?